What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards, and today we're going to talk about the 10 games that I think you need to try that aren't D&D. We took a poll a couple of weeks ago, and this overwhelmingly won your vote. So what we're going to do today is talk about some games that I feel are underappreciated because they sit in the shadow of the behemoth that is D&D. There's different genres, different mechanics, different developers, and most importantly, different play styles. So without further ado, let's get into it. If you are enjoying the content you see here today, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, as that is the only way to overcome the algorithmic beast and get through to the YouTube audience. If you feel like the content is worth a couple of your hard-earned bucks a month, consider a channel membership. They start at $2, give you early access to videos, a couple other small perks, but mainly just a way to support the channel. With that out of the way, on with the show. First up on my list is Ironsworn and Ironsworn Starforged by Sean Tompkin. With Ironsworn and its brother Starforged, you can resolve any action you can imagine by rolling 2d10 and a 6-sided die. You will add your mods from your character. They'll have stats and different skills that will be specific to different types of actions. Let's say I've got 2 here. So if I've got 2 mods, I add that to my 6-sided die, and that's a 5. So if I beat one of the 10-sided die results, well, that's a weak hit. I get what I want, but I probably have some consequences to go with it. If I beat both of them, then that would be a strong hit. I get what I want with no consequences, or I get a little bit extra. If I didn't beat either one of them, well, that's a miss. Just the consequences, no bonuses. Or if I got doubles on these, well, that's a critical version of either the hit or miss scenario. So what makes Ironsworn great? Well, Sean Tompkin is the solo master. It's the reason why Free League hired him to create their Strider mode for the One Ring. He gives us tools and examples and shows us what it is to be a solo RPG player. I actually attribute my growth as a solo player to Sean Tompkin's podcast. Additionally, in both of Sean's outings here, he gives some incredible tables for world building and allows you to, on the fly, really build what your story is, and it makes sense when you're done. I think that this is probably as good a tool for coming up with a narrative as I've ever seen in RPGs. And lastly, he makes the complex simple. The idea that a game that could be anything from Dragonlance to Dark Sun to Ravenloft to Star Wars to Fallout could be resolved with the same simple 3-die roll, and it makes sense. That's incredible. Sean is a very talented designer, and I think his work deserves a little more attention, and that's why I think you should be trying Ironsworn. Next up on my list is going to be Fate. As you can see here, Fate comes in different flavors, from the very simplified Fate Accelerated to the slightly more robust Fate Condensed, or the full meal deal with Fate Core System. In any of these versions, the core concept is going to be that you're going to take a skill or approach, depending on which version you're playing, which has a number associated with it, and then you're going to add or subtract pluses or minuses from the 4 Fate dice, always 4 dice that you roll, and move yourself up or down the ladder, comparing to whatever is your opposing value. Now, you might be able to invoke an aspect or tag by spending a fate point, and that will give you a small bonus. Or you could use a fate point to re-roll your fickle fate dice and try your luck again. But at the end of the day, Everything in Fate, no matter the genre you play with it, because it can be any genre, is determined by 4 actions. You can overcome an obstacle, or create or unlock an advantage, or attack or defend. That is everything in Fate. The latter, as I mentioned, goes from terrible to legendary. So if you have great swordsmanship and you're attacking somebody that is a fair defender, well, you're 2 points above them. You roll your dice. Well, I got a net of -1, so I go from great to good, but it's still 1 better than the fair defender. Now, if he rolled this, well, he stayed at fair, so I still beat him by 1. And that's how everything is resolved in Fate. The great thing about Fate is that it's controlled chaos. These 4 dice give you a very narrow band of results. You can only go 4 higher or 4 lower, and the likelihood of getting 4 of these of the same type is very, very low. So you kind of have a bound accuracy built into the game, which makes things a little bit more predictable within a range, but there's still those very unlikely outliers that can create incredible results. The 4 actions really are all you need to resolve any type of maneuver that you can imagine, and that is saying something because a lot of games might have hundreds of these different resolutions. Fate does it with just 4. That makes it easier to learn for new players and for non-gamers. Another thing that is really cool about Fate is the descriptive gameplay, because you're going to be able to spend Fate points to invoke aspects to add +2 bonuses to your actions. You're going to want to have good descriptors attached to not just your character, but the world they're in, so that you're able to invoke those. Now, in the other games that I talk about in this video, you're going to see little cards up in the corner linking to videos about that game. I have not done a specific Fate video yet, but I did just do a video on Legend in the Mist, which is, I feel, the natural evolution of the Fate system. So I'm going to put that card up there. But that is Fate, and I think you should give it a try. Next up on my list is Against the Darkmaster by Open Ended Games. This is very heavily inspired by Middle-earth role-playing and Rolemaster by Iron Crown Enterprises. The gist of this game is that you would roll a D100 and you would look to add whatever your skill is to that roll, and you would try to get a high roll. The higher the roll, the better. With this system, you're going to have a series of tables that define what those rolls will produce on the battlefield. With Against the Darkmaster, you are going to have the benefit of gory detail. Every weapon swing is a potential life-ending injury, and every time that you perform a feat of grandeur, the roll determines exactly what that ends up looking like. The details in the resolution system go into a critical hit and fumble system that is nigh unmatched in its detail and in its brutality. The character creation in Against the Darkmaster is incredibly deep. You're going to be able to create your character from their kin and their culture and their vocation, and you will be able to come up with basically any trope that you can imagine, as there are a lot of options in there. If you get something like the Secret of the Golden Throne, you add even more to that. If you wanted to play a game set in Middle-earth or Dragonlance, this is a great game to do it. And as most D100 roll systems are going to be roll under, it just feels a little bit different to have a roll high D100 system. One thing I will say is that whenever I play Against the Darkmaster, I have a calculator handy because I want the game to not bog down while I am carrying the numbers. The other thing that sets Against the Darkmaster apart from its competition are the rules for the Darkmasters, the Overlords, the Evils, the Big Bads. So the game has rules for them, but they don't make them a standard adversary. You're not fighting the Darkmaster directly. You are fighting the forces of the Darkmaster. If you ever get a chance to take them down, it's probably going to be through some Deus Ex Machina type situation. It's not going to be in direct conflict. And it does a great job of representing those big bad evil guys that you see in the works of fiction of your favorite authors and your favorite movies without making it a simple roll to kill them. So Against the Darkmaster brings all the flavor and the brutality of the old Rollmaster and MERP systems, and it modernizes it a bit and gives it that special heavy metal quality, and that is why I dig it. And now we're on to Dragonbane, or Drakar I Demoner as it was known in Sweden back in the 80s when it was originally created. With this new Free League version, it is a roll under d20 system, whereby your players are going to be rolling under the target number for their skills, and if they do, they're successful. If they get a 1, that's a dragon, and a dragon is like a critical hit or critical success. If they roll a 20 or a demon, that is a critical failure, a critical fumble. And because the rolls are very much player-facing, the players don't ever have the feel-bads of the DM or GM getting that big roll and ruining their day. No, they can feel responsible for that themselves. This is an easy teach because all the numbers are right there on the character sheet, and as far as the numbers go, they are quite simple and bounded. Hit points are going to be based upon your constitution stat, and they're not going to be increasing by much over time. So you're not going to have attrition-based battles where you're fighting for what seems like hours and hours only to get to the inevitable conclusion that you had already predicted many rounds before. Also, with the skill and abilities system, the characters all feel very unique and very playable. You cannot gimp a character in Dragonbane. They all have their effective abilities. I think that as a teachable game, Dragonbane is incredible. I showed my kids this game and it was a very easy teach. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to show somebody new how to play this game. As far as solo play, if you get the big box, Free League has included a full solo play system. And Alone in the Deepfall Breach provides a different manner of solo play than most games, as it is waypoint based, allowing you to use a lot of theater of the mind to create a system of tunnels and caverns to explore, and you're going to have different outcomes each time, so you can replay the same scenarios many times and have a different experience each one. The last thing I'm going to talk about is character creation, as the character creation is quite quick and also reminiscent of a old AD&D character, as you're going to be rolling a 3 to 18 stat line, and those are also going to determine your starting skill rolls. So with that said, Dragonbane is a great way to experience a non-D&D sword and sorcery, or as they say, mirth and mayhem role-playing experience, and if you haven't tried it, I think you need to. And now we are on to The Call of Cthulhu, written by Sandy Peterson, and the newest edition having a lot of input from Mike Mason. So Call of Cthulhu is largely the same type of game that you would have seen in the early 80s. This game is going to be a roll under D100 system, with the newest 7th edition having degrees of success built into the system based upon fractions of the skills that you're rolling against. The game itself covers the entire Cthulhu mythos, so if you have ever wanted to battle a deep one, or maybe even go against the cultists of Cthulhu himself, then this is going to be the game for you. The things that set this game apart are its heavy reliance upon sanity as a mechanic, and the way that the drip small additions of sanity damage will eventually drive your investigator mad and make them a non-player character. The game itself is one that has a tone that is unmatched by any other game that I've ever played, as this is the kind of game where sometimes winning means that your character died, but they prevented the world from being destroyed. This is a bleak role-playing game that focuses on trying to prevent the coming of the Elder Ones and trying to keep your sanity along the way, both of which are a tall order. Besides the sanity rules, the game itself is just very gritty. The damage is ultra realistic as far as if you get shot with a gun, there is a good chance that you're not coming back from that. It's not the number of times you're shot, it's just that you got shot. You are going to have trauma rolls, and the damage is going to be against a very small pool of health. And this is going to be a game where using your library skill is going to be often much more important than using your marksmanship skill. Another great thing about this game is the classic stories that exist within this mythos. There's, Innsmouth and Arkham and the Mask of Nyarlathotep and all of these different great stories that you can tell within this universe. And as a personal aside, I absolutely adore the different Alone Against series, like Alone Against the Dark, Alone Against the Flames, Alone Against the Frost, Alone Against the Static. These are choose your own adventure style solo plays, but they heavily engage the standard Call of Cthulhu rules while you're playing them, so it is not like you're just reading a book and picking the next page. This is going to be a true role-playing experience. I have had a blast playing them, and I think you will too, and that is why you should try Call of Cthulhu. And now I'm going to talk about Mutant Crawl Classics, though much of what I have to say could be easily applied to Dungeon Crawl Classics or X Crawl Classics as well, as all three use the same basic system, which is a D20 roll high, loosely based on the core of the 3.0 D&D shell. With all three of these, you're going to have some really wild crit tables that create a gonzo gaming experience. You could have a number of different unpredictable results at the table that will result in the big bad being killed with a errant shot by the halfling archer, or the rad beast being blasted with the tiny laser pistol and exploding into a gory mess. The ever-present death in the game is one of the charms, because those same crits can play against the players as well, making life very fragile. Another thing about this system is going to be the spell burn or rad burn, which allows players with mutations or spells to trade their stats, the physical stats at least, to get a higher result on their table. And as spells and mutations have page-long tables of different results based on how high you roll, they can get pretty wild. With a first level spell or a basic mutation, if you roll high enough, you might have an effect that could destroy an entire village of enemies. Of course, if you roll low enough, you might open a portal to another world and invite Nyarlathotep to come destroy it. All of that creates a life is cheap kind of scenario and makes players focus more on having fun than trying to build out their character to the 10th level, because most characters in Dungeon Crawl Classics, Mutant Crawl Classics, or X Crawl Classics will never see level 2. Another aspect of all three of these games is there is a specific focus on making the monsters unique. You're not just fighting a werewolf, you're fighting the werewolf. So whenever you are having your adventures, everything has a little bit more of a surprise or mysterious element to it, because it's not just a stockpile of the same old bads again and again. And that is a very good goal to have with any of our role playing experiences. So, with all that said, if you want a zany gonzo type of experience in whatever genre works for you, well, grab some Zaki dice and try one of these. Hyperborea, or the Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, as it was formerly known. This is written by friend of the channel Jeffrey Talanian by his Northwind Adventures game company. This is going to be a game that came out of his personal campaign, where he blended elements of AD&D and basic BXD&D together, as well as a huge amount of house rules. This game is going to be incredible for a number of reasons, but number one is the setting. I call this a deja vu setting because it has elements picked and plucked from the best parts of fiction. You're going to see Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft, among others, in Talanian's world of Hyperborea. This makes for a very broad range of experiences you can have in this system, in this setting. Even if I weren't going to play Hyperborea as a game, I would still consider using Hyperborea as a setting nonetheless. But there's good news, because the game is great too. This is the best evolution of Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson's game. This did not stray like the third edition of Dungeons & Dragons did from the original formula. No, it rather built upon it. This game takes the best elements of BXD&D and AD&D and clears up some of the wonkier parts with some great house rules and makes it into an experience that you can enjoy whether you are a first-time gamer or an old grognard like myself. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the characters, because the characters here have class. And I mean that they have lots of class, because there are more than 20 classes in the Hyperborea game. These are mainly variations of the four primary classes. You've got your fighting men, your magic users, your clerics, and your thieves. But within those, all of these subclasses cover the cataphracts and the pyromancers and the monks and the rangers and on and on and on. And with more than 20 classes, you might think that they would start to have a lot of overlap, but really the way that it's done, each does have their own particular role to play in the game, and they have all been fine-tuned to the point where there's not a dud amongst them. Every time I open the book, I think, man, I want to play this. It's always a different one, though I will tell you, the Barbarian from this game is probably my favorite D&D version of the Barbarian. There you have it. And that's why you should play Hyperborea. And now we have Savage Worlds. Now, I know if you've been following the channel for a while, you're probably not too surprised to see this one here. As a matter of fact, a few of you called me out in the comments when I teased this video, and you said, yeah, we know you're going to have this one on your 10 list. And you were right. You nailed me. You got me. But why wouldn't I talk about this game? This game is incredible. I've done fantasy with it. I've done horror with it. I've done post-apocalyptic with it. I've done supers with it. There is nothing this system cannot do. This game is always going to be able to be tweaked and modified to meet the needs of the story at the table and the game master in specific. So besides being a flexible game, this game creates some incredible experiences at the table because of the spectacular swings. So with exploding dice and small wound pools, you are always going to have the ever-present looming fear that this could be your last roll. It leads players to either go all in and do incredible and zany things, and that's a lot of fun, or it makes them try to resolve situations without their blaster or their broadsword. And in either of those cases, those are things that often get ignored in Dungeons and Dragons, where it's much more predictable and mathematical in its resolution. So, with these swings and these exploding dice, it encourages a different, wild, frenetic type of gameplay, and I dig it. And so have the players that I've introduced this to. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the savage settings for Savage Worlds. So, with Rifts, Deadlands, Lankmar, Holler, Robotech, Pathfinder, on and on and on. You can find a setting book or books. A lot of these are incredibly well supported. The Rifts line in particular has a ton of releases for it. But you can find a campaign that is fully supported that you can play right out of the box, and it's going to have everything you need to have that great Savage Worlds experience while still being in the same game that gives you the toolkit to do it on your own. To me, that alone is reason enough that you should be giving Savage Worlds a try. And we have the One Ring. Now, this is probably going to be another one that doesn't surprise you if you've been watching the channel for a while. The One Ring by Free League Publishing, now in its second edition, and designed by Francesco Nepatello. The game is incredible. It bases itself on a simple resolution system where you roll a special 12-sided die that has the numbers 1 through 10, plus a Gandalf and a Sauron symbol, Gandalf being an automatic success, Sauron sometimes being an automatic failure, but often just being a 0, and rolling a number of dice equal to a pool by the skill that you are using, and going against a target number that is right on your character sheet determined by your character's build. It makes for a very simple resolution mechanic for everything that you're going to do in the game. So with the One Ring, you have the opportunity to relive the experiences found in The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or The Silmarillion. And whenever you're doing that, you are going to have mechanics that are built to enhance that experience. This is not a game that was designed to do something else and you're cramming the IP into it. This is a game that was designed from the ground up to be a Tolkien game. The way that the game administers the different elements of play through the journey phase and the adventuring phase and the fellowship phase, it covers all of the beats that you remember from your favorite Tolkien fiction, and it kind of leads you down that path to create the kind of stories that you saw in the movies or read in the books. The flavor throughout is purely Tolkien, with the words chosen for the different elements of the game being plucked right out of Tolkien's writing. As I said, the resolution system being a universal system where all of the information is on the player's side. They know what they need to roll to get a success every single time. But the thing that really drew me into this game was the Strider mode, because when I started playing it, I didn't have a group interested in it. I do now, but I didn't then. And Strider mode, which was designed by Sean Tompkin of Ironsworn fame, Strider mode is an incredible toolkit to develop your own Tolkienian stories set in the land of Middle-earth. And as you roll through Eriador, you are going to come up with some great memories of how your elf lord impacted the world at large. The Strider mode was the first solo add-on to an existing game that I felt like really captured both the original game mechanics and the solo experience to a degree that I was comfortable saying, this is my definitive way to play this game. So with that all said, I think that is the reason you should try the One Ring. And last but not least, Tales of Argosa by Steve Grodzicki of Pickpocket Press. Now, Tales of Argosa is another D20 roll high system, though there are some elements of it that use a D20 roll under as well. That can be a little bit confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it's not a big deal. This is probably my biggest surprise of 2025, and it was a great surprise. I had a fan in the comments tell me I really needed to try this game, and I thought, yeah, I hear that a lot. If I tried every game that everybody told me about, I would never be able to get to work and be able to afford to buy all these games you guys are telling me about. But they sent me a free preview copy of the game, and I got to reading it, and I thought, oh my goodness, they were right. This is a game that I should have been playing. And once I did play it, man, it changed the way I looked at gaming. This is an incredible innovation on the D20 system. I love the way the skills work. I love the way the combat works. I love the way that the monsters work. I love that it is not big piles of attrition-based combat. It's quick, it's gritty, and it is one that is going to draw you in. So this game has nat 19s on top of all of the critical hits and fumbles that you're used to. The nat 19s are going to be tables that are going to be similar to what you would see in Against the Darkmaster. Gritty, incredibly detailed results based upon the type of weapon or attack that you're using. It's got a build a feature mode for your player characters where you can work with the GM to determine what special features define your particular character, allowing you to have a truly unique character because you are actually designing some of those features. Now, there are plenty of examples. If you're not into game design and you don't want to try that, fine, use the ones that are in the book. They work just great, and there's lots of different ways to use them. But if you are a creative and you want to get your particular character to be a little bit different than everybody else, this is a great opportunity to do that, and it encourages that collaborative storytelling with the Game Master. But last, and my favorite thing about Tales of Argosa, is the incredible Lone Wolf solo. So it relies on these oracle dice with their yeses and nos and blanks, and then it has this fate die that has skulls and suns and blanks. And whenever you're playing the solo mode, if you roll this, then maybe you get an extra attack. If you roll this, then the attack that hits you actually just missed. What this says is what the enemies were doing. Oh, they were eating when you came upon them, or they were having a gathering, a conversation. Maybe they were just sitting around the fire. But you can answer any question with these yes-no dice, and then add an element of fate to it with this fate die. And this is just a great way to kind of change the tone of the game so you see that the monsters or the enemies have a life too. They're not just waiting to fight you. What were they doing when you came upon them? And then if that wasn't enough, he has this great deck of cards that act as an oracle that you can use to gain context for your different adventures. And upon doing so, you'll have something that is part his creativity, but also your own in your interpretation. And I think that is the key to a great solo experience. And that is why I think you need to be trying Tales of Argosa. Look at those absolute legends. Keith, Simone, Dengar the Mighty, Joke, Blue Rose Lion, Agile Monk, Bjorn, and Mike the Hammer. Special thanks to I Am Not Tim, Acene Dean, and Steve Grodzicki. There you have it, folks. That's my top 10 list of games that aren't D&D, but you should be trying. So tell me about your own games. What games do you think I should have on the list that I didn't? Tell me about some of the experiences you've had with the games that I talked about today. I'm looking forward to having that conversation in the comments section. And until next time, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.